So you're going to measure from the middle of your shoulder, wherever you want it to start. Middle. Mm-hmm. And then you're going to want to measure down from your shoulder on how far you want it to go down your arm, and then to go down the middle of your chest. I'm going to do mine into 3 parts, with 2 parts in the front, 1 part in the back, and then they're going to lace on the sides and the front. So I've gone ahead and drawn my pattern. So I give myself about 1 inch extra. You want it to be the same as the other side, so I just cut 1 piece for that, and then I'll just turn it, flip it around, and trace it and double it again. So I like to use paper patterns because I feel it's easier for me to get the symmetry right. It's also a great way to kind of be able to repeat your project if you need to, or take a step backwards if you need to. I also am a painter and drafts person, so drawing and working with paper is kind of where I start. And all the indigenous materials that I use, beads, the silver berries, and the moosehide, is all just informing that work and that art. So. And for this pattern, I just drew out a scalloped edge, and then it's just measured to my body, and each scallop pattern is the same, and so it lays in a nice collar.
So I guess when we're looking at the hide, you want to get the best pieces for your front and your sides, the front and the back, and you want to make sure that it's not stiff. So like even on this side right here, see how stiff it is?
Mm-hmm.
And thick, because if you're going to bead through it too, it's going to be too hard to poke through.
Yeah.
And you want nice material to use for around your cape.
Because you want it to mold to your shoulders and in front.
Right, because you want it to drape. I think it would fit nice. It's good to do it like this too, because each of these will line up evenly with your skin.
Because they're all the same.
Oh. Because your skin is different.
Yeah.
Different. It has different thickness. And I don't usually like to cut right in the middle of anything, because then you can use it for something else. But this is your piece you want to use. And see, you don't want something too much like this right here, because see how much it moves up.
Mm-hmm. You want something that's going to lay kind of flat.
And that's how come I like using paper, so you can see it at first. But you definitely have to make a cloth pattern with your paper, mm-hmm, to see how it drapes on you, like we did with the velvet. I would pin this down and then trace it out and then cut.
Okay.
Because it won't matter if this is a little thick in the back.
Okay.
Because it's gonna lay flat.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the one you want for your front.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Mm-hmm. So we're flipping it over so we can trace it. We don't want to draw on the front, so we're tracing on the rough side, the back of it.
So we want to make sure we get all the way to the top here. Okay, now hold on to that right there.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to make sure that this connects really well here first.
Yep. You also want to make sure that the hide doesn't have its own natural bubbles. You want it to lay flat before you start. Okay.
I'm kind of a perfectionist about this guy. It will make a difference when you're done. There we go.
Okay.
So when I'm tracing the pattern,
Little dotted lines.
yep. So then you don't have a lot there.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to do so many.
You don't think so?
Not so close, yeah. Because the less lines you have, the better. Just like little points. See that?
It's all drawn out, and now I'm just starting to cut along the edges. I always kind of cut like at the right in the inside too. It's a little easier to control for me. Larger scissors are easier to grip, really sharp scissors, and then just moving. I think moving it around in the angle that's best, you know, because it's precious material, so if you cut it, you're wasting a lot. My Aunt Sandra is our language teacher, along with Jeanie Maxim, and so she taught me how to say in Ahtna what I'm doing. So, Lindaldotsi, kat, Denigi kazes, kat, eats ass, means I'm cutting the Denigi kazes, the Denigi, the hide, the moosehide, with scissors. Once you put the button on there, it will hold on. And then I'm also going to have probably dentalium hanging down here, and then beadwork all on it, and silverberries. I'm deciding what kind of beadwork I want to do on my yoke. So I am just sort of freehanding some floral patterns. I tend to do kind of sort of non-symmetrical work in a more of a contemporary beading way. And I just do some of my favorite Alaskan floral. I have African violets, which were my great-grandma's favorite flowers, and then I have some wild roses, some rose hips, and some silverberries that I'm drawing. So I finished drawing out my pattern, and I've outlined it in a darker pen, and now I'm going to lay it down and use my awl to poke holes so I can draw out my stencil onto the hide. So I first want to pin it down. So I use my awl to go along my drawing and poke holes all along it. And then from there, I go ahead and take my pen, and I'll just gradually draw along the holes. So I'll create a nice little pin, little pin marks on there. And then I go through that, and I take my pencil, and I just kind of lightly draw the outline where the little dots are. And then, as you can see, I've already started with my beadwork along the lines. So after my pattern is all drawn on and I have it traced and I'm able to kind of go back and forth and make sure that I've checked it and it's all correct, I'll just take the pins out and pull the pattern off. I just tend to draw on one section and then bead that section and then move on to the next one. It's easier for me to see how my pattern's developing. Some people like to draw the entire pattern on and then work that way, but I like to work in smaller sections. So I'll work on this flower and these rose hips and leaves, and then I'll move on to the next part. I've decided not to put on a paper backing onto this piece because this moosehide is so thick, and it's going. I want it to be kind of floppy and to drape over my chest and shoulders. If you want something a little bit more rigid, you'd put a paper backing on it. For a medallion or a Brett or something like that. My auntie actually came in and looked at it, and she thought that I should put a backing on it just in case. With a really nice piece of moosehide like this, you don't want to be having to redo it so many times. You want to keep it nice. So I went ahead and put just some interfacing, just a really light medium weight one. And I've gone through and I've just tacked it with really large stitches all along it to keep it there. And as I go, as I continue, so you can already see a little bit of the beading I've done on it. So with this pattern here, I'll actually sew with 2 needles. So I have this string here is going to have my beading needle on it, and it's going to hold all my beads in place. And as I'm stretching each, so I'll add 4 beads at a time, and as I'm stretching each one, I'll go through with the glover and actually go through the hide and tack down every 2 beads in the line that they're needing to follow the stencil. So I've gone ahead and tied my knot. So I'm going to be getting my second needle ready with the glover. This is actually the needle that's going to actually go through the moosehide and tack down every 2 beads. So it's Nymo thread, which is a nylon thread. So it's nice in hiding your stitches because you can actually burn the knot into like a tiny little nub. So I'm going to do right here. You just need a little bit of heat for it to melt onto itself.
And I just leave it just like that. So the beads that I use are size 13, so I have to use a size 10 beading needle. And they don't make Glovers small enough. Glovers are the leather needles for size 13 Charlotte beads that I'm using. I'm going through and using the 2 needles. And what I want to do here is take this needle. So this is a size 10 beading needle with size 0 thread and size 13 check Charlotte beads. And check Charlotte beads are true cut, so they're cut on each side. So they're really sparkly and pretty, but they also can be kind of sharp. So you have to be somewhat gentle with them so you don't rip your thread. And they're all varying too. They're all individual. So like this little bead won't work on the needle because it won't go through. So I usually put about 4 on at a time. So I never use this needle to go through the hide. You can go through the top if you want, but I just kind of hold it right on the surface, and then I put that aside into my beading mat. And I'm going to take my second needle, and this is the one that's actually going to pierce the hide. And I'm going to go through, and first 2 beads I'm going to tack down. And in this you can really control the curve then, because you're tacking down every two beads. So you're wanting to pierce the hide on either side of the beads as close as you possibly can. That way you don't see your thread as you're going. And you don't want to be too tight with it either. You want to just kind of let it, so you want it to be able to move enough that it's not going to kink up. And it just has to take a little bit of trial and error. See, that's a little bit too far, so I have to get a little bit closer. Going back through. There we go. So tension is really important. Now I'm ready for 4 more beads. I'm going to pick up 4 more, just like that. Pull it through. Hold it down along my stencil line. Not too tight. Not too tight, not too loose. You just have to get a feel for it. Make sure you don't cross your threads. And then you're going to find the next 2 beads. It's too far, too far. Right there. And I use just about an arm's length of thread each time because it's easier to handle, and you know, this process, it takes a while, so you go through it pretty slowly.
Getting your line straight is really important, so it's good to slow down, because as I lift this, you see how I kind of pucker the hide. If I do that too much, or I'm too rough with the hide, I'm going to create bubbles in my beadwork, and it's not going to lay flat when it's finally on the body or laid out. So you have to really be careful about how many beads you're doing, and just really take it slow. This kind of beadwork, if you're too tight, it shows. All the beads will pucker up, and everything won't lay right, and gets really angry, which is why you have to do your beadwork when you're in a good mindset. And it's also really important to have good thoughts when you're beading. You need to, because all that goes into your beadwork. So you usually just hold it with this thumb and then go through. You know, and it just takes practice. You know, it's a big thing. See, look, I went here and I'm just kind of estimating where it is that I'm pushing my needle through and how close it is to the bead. So that's not close enough, obviously. So I need to pull back, go back through, and it's right on the line, so that's good. It's also important too to be mindful of even the stitches that are on the behind. Growing up, if my stitches weren't straight, that would be something that would get cut out, because it will compromise the integrity of the beadwork. And then it's also a little bit of a rite of passage, I think, too, to get your stitches cut out when they're not straight. I've already cut out this petal 3 times, I think, you know, just getting warmed up. You have to make sure that your thread is parallel, that you don't have any diagonals, at least not over, or else you'll see the thread as you're beading your rows. So when I'm finishing a circle right here, I like to kind of go through 1 or 2 beads, and I can't really pierce the hide with this beading needle, but this will just kind of hold my beads in place. You kind of tend, at least for me, when I'm doing beadworks on flowers and different floral designs, is you tend to do like one patch, kind of like finishing a circle, and then you fill in that shape. You know, you're finishing this circle, filling in that shape. I mean, these are oblong, but I'm going to have to jump and move to another petal here. I'm going to go ahead and tie this off so I don't have any string that's stretching over here or stretching over here in the back. So I'll pull this out, just use this clover. And then I'm going to go through and try to pierce right under the thread. So now what I'll do is tie off this part here. And I need to tie off both of these needles. And I just do an overhand knot, but I hold kind of the cross right there, and then I'll put my finger on it and pull it. And I'll just do that 3 or 4 times. Because I'll be moving to a different shape, I'll have to also move my second needle to another shape, my clover needle and my beading needle. So I have to knot off both thread separately in the same way with just the overhand knot. I do about 4. Probably take me about a month, maybe a little bit longer to finish the beadwork, because it's also kind of a slow process too, you know, because you have to be in the right mindset. One of our little prayers for beading is Nasizaga Snelyahi Welzet Benini Kazet, which means you have to think good when you're beading. And for me, it's kind of a little bit easier to do this in private as well, you know, so it can be kind of meditative. So I'm going to continue to do the beadwork at home. I have to finish the beadwork all around it before I can move on to the next step, which would be to add the fringe with some dentalium and the silverberries. And then after that, what I'll do is, so you can see some of the bead pattern here, I'll take out all these large stitches, these just couching stitches, and I'll just cut along the interfacing, and then I'll be putting on a silk backing so it can lay over my clothes and not get caught on anything. And then I'll probably put some fox or otter trim around the collar, but that will be next steps. It's good to take your time on works like this, you know. This material is so important, and Moosehide is so, this process just demonstrates how precious it is, you know, and learning the stories that are, you know, connected with Moosehide and our communities and, you know, our spirituality. It's, when you're creating this kind of work, you really have to think about where it's going to go even after you're done with it, after it's spent enough time with you. I mean, you give away everything that you make, you know, and usually you give away the first thing that you make. So this is going to be given to someone at some point, you know, and that life is really important. So you have to honor it by doing good work and spending time. The regalia that I have, that it's all been given to me, so it's been handed down through families to families to families. A lot of times you'll give gifts to opposite clans, so it's just that there's this back and forth of gift giving, you know, and keeping families strong. And this piece will probably be something that I give to my family or to another clan. So it will be handed down for many years to come.